Hi, everyone. Welcome to Human Centered. I'm Nick Brunker, a Managing Director of Experience Strategy at VML and your host for the show. Today, we're exploring a topic at the heart of every business, customer experience. It's a field that's evolved dramatically from simple interactions to sophisticated, data-driven experiences many of us now expect. To truly understand where we're headed, it's often said we need to understand the past. Our guest today has done some deep thinking on this subject and more. He's charted a course through CX's history and into what he terms the Predictive and Autonomous Era, where technology and AI are set to reshape CX even further. I'm thrilled to welcome in Nick Yecki, Executive Director of Experience Strategy at VML, whose recent work in EXP Magazine actually sparked this conversation. Nick, welcome to Human Centered. Pleasure to have you.
Awesome to be here, Nick. Thanks. It's going to get kind of confusing with all the Nicks thrown out today, but I guess we'll deal with it. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk through this and hopefully some other things.
Likewise, man. And certainly a busy time for all of us in the CX space. Before we delve into the evolution that we're going to spend most of our time talking about, perhaps you could share a bit about your own journey, both at VML and just overall in CX.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like from a career perspective, a lot of things have added up to getting me where I am today with CX. I've got I kind of came of age in the internet era, right? Kind of the 1.0, 2.0 era, which was awesome and exciting. And I think we've lived through a couple things since with mobile and, social and the mobile and obviously AI now, super interesting. But my background's really, I was kind of a software engineering and business major in college. So super interested in, how do we create things? I was really into graphic design in high school, if you go back to that era of myself. So just kind of enamored with computers and creating things and all that. And ultimately, I've had a bit of a history of entrepreneurship as well. I like to try things, like to dabble in things. So my first business was a breakfast delivery service in the Detroit area where I grew up. My mom was a high school teacher, and we're just looking for some side income, and so we kind of started this business together, which is pretty cool. We'd collect bagels from a couple great spots around town on Sunday mornings and deliver them, but the smell of kind of sweaty cardboard and paper bags still gets me to this day, because that's what our cars would smell like. But anyways, I love creating things, and I've always done that. I've started a couple startups, raised venture in that world, spent a number of years in the agency world as well, kind of by accident, building creative and building technology experiences there. And then I've been at VML for about 10 years now, which is unbelievable. Time flies, as everyone says, but and have been a part of this customer experience and experience strategy team with yourself and a bunch of other phenomenal people. So here today and really kind of try to apply that creativity, that spirit of entrepreneurship, and just at the core, like understanding what do people need and trying to solve problems for them on a day-to-day basis.
Going back to that small business that you set up, the bagel biz, is that an area that maybe ignited your passion for CX, being able to deliver, goods and services to people? What things like that along the way really ignited your passion for the space? Because you have had such a broad experience set, no pun intended.
Sure.
What got you interested in experience strategy and experience design as the capability as a thing became more of a major than a side hustle?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think it was nothing on purpose, right? As many things in life are. One thing I learned from that bagel business was something I kind of learned from my mom along the way. And, she wouldn't say she had any expertise in this, but we were really just delivering bagels at first, right? And so she's like, hey, what if we diversify the business? We're getting these requests from our customers. Like they wanted cream cheese, and they wanted lox, and they wanted orange juice, and a couple people wanted frosted flakes for their grandkids that were coming over. And some people were saying, hey, do you have muffins or cookies, right? You don't want to go crazy in that. But I think what we learned, and we did a nice job of iterating, by chance, we added a few items to our stable of offerings, and that really met customer needs, met them where they were, and they were feasible for us to bring forward. So, learned a lot there. I built a solar energy startup a number of years ago, which is a marketplace for solar installers, kind of at the cusp of that solar industry starting to take off in the United States, or at least we thought it was taking off at the time. And learned a lot there. And I think we missed on a bunch of stuff, right? And I think that's something to this day that kind of drives me forward of, we really do need to truly understand at a deep level what customers need, what people, not customers even, what people need, right? Like, what do people need? What are they looking for? How can we help them? How can we use technology as an accelerant to help them through that? And I think if I would have had a bit more of that mindset, would have been successful in different ways in some of those ventures too. So it's a clear lesson, and it's kind of that true north that I always come back to is it deeply understanding and understanding broadly where people are and what they need, what the gaps are, what they love, and then kind of working around that to bring new things to them.
You hit on one of the eras, and that's actually one of the segues I'll use to move to the next part of the discussion, which is, as you wrote the article that we'll post in the show notes for EXP Magazine and kind of sparked this conversation, you started to go into the history of CX, and as a good strategist would, trying to simplify the complex down into a handful of eras that you've seen evolve over time. We've talked about a few different ones on the show before, but in your piece specifically, you talk about the service era, the satisfaction era, the relationship era, and the experience economy. We can dive in a little deeper into each one in a minute, but for now, could you give us a sense of each and maybe highlight how each of those stages built upon the previous and really transformed how businesses engage with customers?
Absolutely. Yeah, I kind of nerded out on this. I hadn't seen. I was doing a presentation for a client, and they were wondering what about the future of CX, right? And I'm like, oh, awesome topic, but like we kind of have to understand the past to know the future and see where it's going. So that's where this came from. So I broke this up in 4 eras, in broad buckets. So you've got the service era. Think pre-1900s to 1950s. So a really broad period of time in our history, but this is, we start to get to the idea of personal interactions and transactional service. So you're thinking of like Woolworths, so you're thinking of Sears. This is the era in which like the Sears catalog came out. Those first Sears catalogs came out. And so that was quite an innovation at the time for people to be able to flip through and choose, kind of self-discover, right, in kind of a quote unquote personalized manner. Pretty awesome. And that set the tone, right? That set the tone for innovations moving forward from the corner store to something a bit more orchestrated. And then we move into the satisfaction era, which is the next kind of wide period of time, 50s to the 80s, where we get into customer satisfaction and loyalty measurement from a business perspective. Businesses seeing this as experience broadly, and engaging with customers is something important to their bottom line, which I think set us up for the future. We had the onset of technologies, the internet, obviously, in the 90s to the 2000s as we moved into the relationship era, a big kind of transformation from the early days of personalization, right? The early days of choice. You started to see CRM systems and things of that nature come to bear, right? We're building the foundations of customer experience. And then finally, experience economy, which is where we have been probably since the 2010s-ish through today. And you could argue we're accelerating into a new era with AI in it. And AI probably creates a new era moving forward that's informed by experience, but experience economy is really about being data-driven, personalized, immersive experience, bringing many more factors to play to help people get really custom, specific experiences that help deliver value to them at the end of the day.
So I guess we could start with the service era a little more deeply.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, we'll just call it the start of what we're chatting through in the pre 1900s through 1950s, often described as maybe centered on personal interactions where trust and relationships were driving loyalty, where it really was more of a one-to-one in a weird way because of just that's how business was done then. What enduring lessons can modern CX draw from the emphasis on personal interactions built on trust and relationship?
I love that question because I think this is the root of experience, which at the end of the day, it's all about humans, right? I mean, the name of this podcast, Human Centered, right? This is about humans and serving humans and people. And that's what was going on in that era. It was simple. We were listening, helping people in a direct, uncomplicated manner, be it at the corner store, be it through, innovations like the Sears catalog, like I mentioned, but providing a level of service, right? Service was something that wasn't just getting the product in your hands. It was doing it maybe in a kind manner, right? In a value add manner where you explained how to use the product, how to use the medication that you were purchasing or the tool that you were purchasing for yard or farm work or whatever that may be. But I think overall, I think pulling this forward is like simplicity at the end of the day. Listening and understanding people where they're at could be a very simple question, and addressing that head on so they can make progress, right? They can make progress in what they're trying to accomplish as your customer and or your partner. Within the business. So yeah, I love the service era. I mean, it's a wide set of time, 1900s, pre-1900s, even through the 50s. But it was a time of great change, obviously in the US as the US expanded significantly during that time too.
Yeah. And then you fast forward to the satisfaction era where we're talking 1950s, baby boomers into the early 1980s. Yeah. You had in the piece talked about satisfaction being defined through increased competition and differentiation, and ultimately satisfaction being the holy grail of sorts. You had mentioned in the piece about American Airlines, the Advantage program as an example. Yep. How do you think, and why do you think we saw that shift, and how it began to redefine customer loyalty?
Yeah, I actually look at the satisfaction era after, thinking about it probably more than anyone should or has, but this was really about, I think this is more selfish from a business perspective, business centric in this case, like businesses saw the value in creating great experience, right? And so we started to see things like the Advantage program, which is awesome. I would argue it's maybe better for the business than it is for customers at the end of the day, as many of these travel programs are. But that's okay. Customers get value out of them, free flights and upgrades and things of that nature. But from a business perspective, they saw tremendous value here. And we actually had the systems available in this time, right? We started to have computing and databases and things of that nature available to us in this time. So I think it was really about businesses accelerating and growing during this time of satisfaction, measurement of satisfaction, bringing that to the forefront in the boardroom, right? Like satisfaction being something important to measure beyond just, sales, margin, et cetera, et cetera. The other piece I think that was interesting in this era, which is a little more kind of advertising driven, but I think it impacts experience, or it sets a foundation for experiences. We started to see some more emotion enter the experiences during this time. If you look at Coca-Cola and what they did over time with developing characters, the Santa campaigns, like all those things, I'm not saying they're exclusive to this era, but I think they really came into the mainstream. Yeah. McDonald's in a big way, right? They think of the characters around McDonald and like his crew really set a foundation of experience. And then that translated in a McDonald's case. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, those characters would be all over the stores, right? Gosh, yeah. And so the experience was differentiated.
I think it's a really interesting discussion point you bring up around the way that stories were starting to get told, how value is perceived from a customer perspective. And it was just at the beginning, again, dating ourselves a little bit, about the same time periods in which we grew up, where you weren't quite ready in the mid 1980s, early 1980s to almost connect in a way that was beyond when you go to a store and you see these characters and they're when you're looking on a TV commercial, like you start to experience value through a completely different prism, if you will, in the 1980s. And then you shift into like the early 90s and into the 2000s, which brings us to how you describe it, the relationship era. And it's where really technology started to mature in a big way, as all the CRM systems were starting to become a reality. The internet was starting to scale. Omni-channel experiences, even in the later 90s, were starting to become a thing. Can you think back to at that period of time, both in your research, but then also in your own experience? How did technology first start to fundamentally alter the customer relationships during that time? And how do you recall and remember some of those things as you've grown up in that era? For
sure. Well, I think, like the concept of CRM systems maturing with software in development during that time was critical, right? Just the concept of like having data on customers and being able to do things with that. I think The other way I think about this too is, especially with the internet, right? And this is probably maybe a bit just my perspective, but with the internet, I think the experience became the business and the offering in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
For me, a big kind of transformational moment, I remember it was like discovering eBay, right, in the 90s.
Yeah.
And eBay was like, all of a sudden, there was this world where the data and the information and the experience was the product and the business of eBay, right? This marketplace concept and interacting with people across the country or across the world to buy unique things, be it a music poster from a festival that I was interested in, right? Or a football card or a baseball card I was collecting at the time, right? Or some cool t-shirt, vintage t-shirt I wanted to purchase. But like that required the eras that came before it in terms of people's expectations changing, technology enabling this, data being collected over time. But I think ultimately the experience became the business and the offering, and started to much more so in this era.
And I just was thinking of something too, when you date ourselves again back to the late 90s when the internet started to come on board, you're downloading music, Napster was a big thing, Amazon was just getting underway. The sort of things that you might think about, like what does connection with a brand actually feel like as technology was beginning to scale. We were still probably in its infancy stage, not even really infancy stage, even more premature than that, to where we go next, which is the experience economy, let alone where we're going to go in this new era of AI and anticipation and predictive areas. But gosh, it reminds me of how little we were really connecting with brands in the digital space. And so we were still heavily reliant on all the physical interactions, but we were also in a position where individually, human to human, thinking like AOL Instant Messenger and others, where those new budding types of connections were starting to form at a personal level. So I find it interesting looking back to like how the experience economy was quite literally built, which is the next like era that we talk about.
Yeah.
How the way that era in the, let's just call it, mid 2000s to present would not have been possible if the regular people, I'm going to call it that, humans without brands, were starting to reshape how interaction was done and how value was perceived. Like I could talk to you on AOL Instant Messenger, which was a completely new concept. We were years away from being able to connect with the brand that way, let alone be personalized in our communications from a brand to a customer. Having had a chance to sit back and think about it, man, how much crazy progress was made between, let's just call it 1998, 99 through 2005 even. And how brands, quite literally as we know them today, were shaped, sometimes in cases created, by the fact that those little technologies that were starting to gain steam, completely agnostic of any business, took shape in that relationship era in the late 90s. It's crazy.
Yeah, and all those concepts, right? You mentioned concepts that are now, I think, critical to customer experience overall, experiences that every, most, if not every brand, big and small, offers. Think about eBay, the concept of marketplace. Digital marketplace wasn't something. So brands today, they either create their own marketplaces or participate in marketplaces, right? I mean, Amazon is the biggest example of that we have gigantic brands that are Colgate, P&G, right? Like people are selling cars within that marketplace today. I think the concept of instant AIM, right? AOL Instant Messenger back in the day, like
classic.
They translate that out to chat, right? Like, I mean, you get chat support and chat service, and the progress that's making from being like AI driven into the future and being insanely helpful for people. I think that really laid the ground with these kind of new brands at the time. And then if you think about those brands today, they've evolved significantly, which I think transitioning to the experience economy, which is, as you mentioned, to kind of 2010s, early 2000s to present. I really think about this as, this is a build, right? There's more data, more personalization. There's a lot going on. There's also some advocacy that goes on here with companies like Patagonia, who are maybe doing things that are less digital in terms of creating a great personalized experience around people who want to, support the world around them. They don't want to overbuy. So they create experiences that are relevant to those groups. I think for me, the biggest differentiator here from as I'm thinking and working with clients or looking at a business or looking at a market is we need to be much more full journey. The view is much more full journey in this experience economy. And Airbnb, I think, is a great example here, right? Airbnb, incredible business. But what they've done over time is expand from just where you rest your head at night, right? Into, if you've seen any of their campaigns over the past 6 or so months, experiences. Experiences are where they've been building this for some time, but like that is full journey. So it's not just about where you stay, it's about what you do when you go to a destination.
Yeah.
And I think they're even pushing those in your local cities now today. So another part of this is if you look at, I was watching a baseball game last night and they were talking about the complex being built around the stadium. It was actually the Royals, Kansas City Royals playing the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to St. Louis and been to the baseball stadium there, it's been there for a number of years. It was a nice stadium. It's been a long time since I've been there, but there was all a bunch of vacant land around there. But now they've built a bunch of stuff up, which this is the norm. If you look at like Atlanta, if you go to LA, any of these cities, they've built up these complexes. And so these are much more full journey experiences that these clubs and these cities are building, right? It's not just about going to the game. It's about maybe spending a weekend around the game, staying near the game, eating near the game, going to a museum, right? Like full immersion. And I think that perspective of full journey end to end that goes beyond just the interaction that your core business has with a customer is really critical to the era that we've been in and that we're moving into as technology, AI specifically, accelerates.
Yeah, and the data behind that obviously enables more, intelligent recommendations, and ultimately what we've seen in the metrics is that people will pay more for those personalized experiences, which makes total sense. Why wouldn't you? And I think the arena district, as we've called it in other places where they've got hotels and other events and things to do, it really does become more than just the event. And much like you're selling more than just the product, you're selling the experience around the product. And I think it's a really interesting on-ramp for a lot of brands that are still stuck in a product led, and not in a bad way, but just focused on selling the widget versus the actual benefit the widget might bring, and then saying, where else can we add value tangentially to our business? And I think that's been a really interesting area for me as I've advanced and worked through my career, is to see how a lot of unlocks have taken place even in the last 10 years, where companies are now moving beyond just, here, I'm going to sell you this thing that hopefully you will use and to I'm actually going to help advance and improve your life, which goes back to the idea of, as the podcast would reference, human-centered, and being able to add value to the life, not just the business, which I think is a great segue to looking forward and defining what's next. Because I do get a sense, and I've talked to many of our guests about this, I feel like we're kind of in that same general window that we were in the mid 90s when we were talking about, the internet was getting up to speed, pun intended. The more people were getting access to it. It was unlocking new ways to do work and business. I feel like we're there in a lot of ways. And I'm playing back some of the things that we talked about when we were hitting on that era, but also just thinking about how we're being smart with data now, how things are becoming more autonomous. In the piece you wrote, you were talking about the predictive and autonomous era, which is kind of where all of the stuff that we've been talking about in the last few episodes about AI and the predictive nature of our business stacks, et cetera, are really interesting. And I feel like we're on the cusp of early stages of realizing the potential, much like we were in the 90s when we're like, man, this internet thing, it's a thing. This is not just a thing that's going to, marginally improve the way that we have previously done things. So much like you were talking about building on the era before it, the key idea here is the company's ability to anticipate and fulfill needs proactively, driven by AI, automation, and data analytics are really going to be the lifeblood or perhaps the death blow to these businesses that exist the way they do today. Let's unpack that a little bit and what that really means for business and customers.
One thing we are absolutely I was one of the podcasts I listened to, I was the other day, and we're in a time of change, and I think everyone agrees it's not controversial whatsoever, but we're at a time of massive change, similar to the internet, as you mentioned. I mean, we've had kind of a crypto wave and a mobile wave and a crypto wave in there, and some of those have had a little more question to them. But I think in this next wave, there's no question. I think the biggest question is, how does it impact, and what is the uptake, right? Like, how quickly do people get involved, and what does maturity start to look like? So I think as we look at like anticipating experience in the future and helping people out, I think this is just simply the expectation, right? Like my kids who are under 10, but I see a world where they never know any different, right? Like things are going to be served up to them, the products they need, the advice they need, all those things are going to be served up on a silver platter as they're interacting with the ChatGPTs of the world. It's integrated into their watches or their phones, or their glasses, their earbuds, or whatever it may be. The thing that worries me about this is people are inherently lazy, right? Like we're pleasure seekers and we're inherently lazy. And we've been programmed to expect this at this point, which is this concept of like, don't make me think, which is one of the principles I think we often use in customer experience of like, how do we improve this? Like, how do we apply the principle of don't make me think here? And I think we're at an extreme end of that. At least the tool of AI can help us get to an extreme end of that. So, I think that's where we're moving very, very rapidly, where things are going to become even more transparent for people. But we can, there's some kind of principles or pillars underneath this that I think get into some more specific use cases, which I really like.
All right, let's talk about a couple of those pillars. I think you were hitting on some of the hyper-personalization stuff, which I think, evidenced in the story. You're talking Spotify is just one of many examples. So that's pretty cool. The other pillar is around AI-driven automation and self-service, which I think you hit the nail on the head. Much like I think the early 2000s babies and beyond, the internet wasn't a new thing. It was just that it was inherent to how they lived their life. And I think we're probably going to be seeing some of that in the very near future for our kids. I have kids as well, three under 10, and this is just the way it goes. Much like I think the best example that most parents could probably of our age at least relate is, what do you mean I have to watch an ad? Like, what do you mean I can't choose the show I want? We're just going to watch what's on. Like that, it's foreign to them. Yet that's absolutely what you and I and many people our age or older. Like, that was just that was the way it was.
What happened?
Sorry,
that was the option.
And so
my son the other day asked me about what was the question? We were watching something, and he said, "Dad, why didn't the pictures have color in them before?" Because we saw a black and white photo. I think it was a black and white photo in something. He's like, why did the pictures not have color in them? And I said, it's kind of a difficult question to answer. I just said, my simple brain, I said, we just have the technology, right? We've advanced considerably. I said, we didn't have television. We didn't have video, right? Like until somewhat recently. So that rate of change, it is just, I like those moments because they make you appreciate and take a step back on the advancements, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think what is fun about it is you get to really start to bridge the gap between what was completely novelty and mind-blowing, and it's every day feels like there's a new mind-blowing technology that starts to roll itself out. I mean, just at its base level, automation and self-service are playing and continue to play a critical role in making CX more efficient and accessible. You had a really good example from the medical space, combining old school monitors with digital enhancements, like definitely compelling. There's something about that nostalgia there. Could you expand on how the integration allows users, well, just keep it in the health space, to track their health independently, and how more industries might adopt similar, more cost efficient and also customer controlled experiences?
Yeah, for sure. The example I found, I just found it, I hadn't seen it personally, was a company called Yecke, I believe. And it's those old school blood pressure monitors that sit in like pharmacies and such, which if you go into a pharmacy, if you're waiting for a prescription ever, you'll see, people use them, and it's great. You just keep track of your blood pressure. But what they've done is they've added basically an app interface to it, right? That sits on your phone, so you can kind of
Right.
track and then get proactive recommendations on it. So something that maybe seems obvious to us today, but what I love about that and this idea of like automation and self-service is what are things that people engage with today that maybe are a bit more a bit less advanced, I guess, right?
Hmm.
And how do we make them more simpler to use? How do we create simplicity? How do we create more power and more value out of that experience? And I think
Yeah.
that's a great one. I think from a spend a lot of time thinking about like contractors and construction and things of that nature in my day job. This is a simple one here. How do we think about the idea of like auto replenishment, right? So
Mm.
people don't have to leave the job site. And how do you use data, contextual data, predictive analytics, things of that nature? So it's actually beyond a self-service experience at that point, right?
Mhm.
Their products show up at their feet,
Yeah.
so they can keep doing the job, making money, making their customers happy. Like that is an incredible automation and self-service experience for someone, as long as you get it right, right? That's
Yeah.
always the question. Do we get it right? Did we send them too much, too little, the wrong thing, the wrong SKU? But I think we're getting to a world where that we have enough data on these customers, we know their behaviors, we know the jobs that they're in,
Yeah.
that we can bring them some automation in that case, which helps everyone. I mean, it helps them make more money, be more efficient, but at the end of the day, it helps their customer too. The homeowner or the whoever they're working for, be happier with the project at the end of the day. So I think a lot can be applied there.
There's another fascinating area that I was talking with Brian Yamada about because he had come out and back from CES. This was many months ago now, but he was talking about the idea of emotion and context recognition as it
Yeah.
relates to like devices you could have attached to you in some way. As creepy as like microchipping to just having sensors and sweat sensors. Those have existed at least in some capacity for a while, but the idea that now with these advancing technologies married with additional technologies that have come online, we're enabling experiences that can adapt to the customer's emotional states, like down to physiological levels of emotional states.
Yeah.
How do you see this emotion driven CX that's potentially measurable and like
Yeah.
based on not just what we kind of are feeling and thinking, but science, and that being a crucial differentiator, particularly in things like medical, high stress, high touch industries like that, or even travel.
Yeah, for sure. I think a very real application here is from an emotion perspective. If you're in healthcare or if you're in travel, how do we detect frustration, right? How do we detect the level of frustration or the level of joy or happiness or excitement in someone's voice, tone, what they're typing?
Yeah.
And these are things that can be done today. And I think if you get back to the core, which again is like helping people out, right? Like meeting them where they are and
Yep.
helping them out.
Yep.
If I know, Nick, that you're super frustrated because you can't get this appointment rescheduled and you need it for your kid because they've got an ear infection or whatever it may be, or something worse, right? You're in a cancer treatment program and your loved one is maybe, and you're managing that for them. Your frustration can boil over, and I think we don't always solve that well, and especially given the tools, right? This is one of the knocks of being more automated and
Hmm.
autonomous and self-service, right? Like we lose that human connection where a person can kind of sense the mood, sense what's going on, and
Yeah.
solve for it. But I think in this case, like sensing that in voice and in tone is a simple way. I think your mention of getting into sensors and things of that nature, I think that requires some hardware and such. But I think in particular, applications, I think deep into healthcare, deep into treatment makes sense. I think another really just simple application here is like as a travel company, you mentioned travel, we've all been there, right? Like we know the storm's coming, but we know we've got a flight. We want to get home or we want to get out to our vacation. Um, how can we use that context and be really proactive and personalize? And the travel company come back and say, hey, it looks like this weather's moving in. I can bump you up 30 minutes or I could bump you up an hour or move you back to the next day. And here's a hotel that you could stay in that kind of maintains your trip, right? Like some really simple things here, but like this is the idea of emotion and context recognition that I think is pretty deep and valuable to find some new solutions or some additional solutions to really help people have better experiences.
And it's in that moment not an upsell or a, here's
No.
how you can spend more money. It's actually, here's how I can improve your day or your situation in context with other things. And before, you were definitely reliant on individual humans being able to make those connections, whereas machines might be able to do that. And again, empower the frontline employees to do better, more impactful work, which I think is another story and another podcast for another day of the whole, doomsday scenario that people are bringing in our world, especially of, well, AI is going to take all of our jobs. Well, I think there's something to be said for being able to reshift our priorities and how we as humans leverage this new technology to make better experiences for people at the end of the day. The other really interesting area that you hit on in the piece, and again, we'll link to it on our podcast show notes, is this concept of invisible CX. And it's an area that I'm really fascinated with because, we all are creatures of habit, good, bad, or indifferent. And you hear the word, and this is like perhaps one of the most overused words in our space, especially in experience strategy, is seamless. And obviously, back to the concept of invisible CX.
It's a bad word.
Not everything needs to be seamless. And frankly, sometimes the seams are actually what make the experience good because you need that barrier or a shift in context or just a mental repositioning for whatever, a moment, right? And there are things like Sam's Club does it. Really everybody's taking after it now. The scan and goes, where you could just take what you want and leave. And that is seamless, but it's also a complete shift in the mental model. If the goal is to eliminate friction and save time, yet also help customers kind of do new things, have new behaviors and habits, how does the approach of invisible CX reshape how engagement with brands will be, making interactions still smooth and intuitive, while also being aware that seamless doesn't always equal better?
Let me meander for a second here, and I'll get there. I think if we go back to emotion and then invisible, I saw this in something a couple of days ago. Just reminded me. It's nothing new. Chewy.com. If any, Chewy user as a pet owner, order your food automatically, auto ship. They kind of, I don't know if they invented it, but they get a lot of credit for auto ship and things of that nature. Dog food was always something or pet food and supplies were something people didn't want to deal with. They've got this kind of magical story, which I know many people who this has happened to. Their dog dies, right? Their pet dies and passes away, and then their next auto ship comes and their food shows up and they're kind of crushed, right? I've been there. I've had a pet that's happened with, and they reach back out and say, "Hey, cancel my auto ship. My pet died, whatever." And then they send flowers, right? They send flowers to the home, $20-$25 or whatever it costs to send flowers. That's a customer for life. That experience of that's emotional and context recognition to a T. There's some invisible experience going on in there as well. It's kind of weird on the back end of that. But I just think it's a beautiful story and a beautiful reminder that any business or any person could find those moments and create special moments out of them to bring them forward for others. I think in terms of invisible CX, and where I'm going here is with the experience at moments being invisible, it is so much more important that brands have attributes, have distinction, have things that make them stand out in the minds of customers. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, because I would argue the interfaces are going to get more and more transparent and invisible over time, right? Yeah. And so you think about, I love the Sam's Club one. It was the first time I had ever done scan and go. It was at a Sam's Club, and it was kind of magic for me. I'm like, this is sweet. I don't have to stand in line. I usually go to Costco, and I got to stand in this long line when I'm done.
Right.
Costco, I guess, is rolling out, as they do, and those are fabulous companies. Costco is rolling out a version of that as well. I just read an article a week or so ago about that. But I think as we move forward into new interfaces that collect massive amounts of data, right, which is essentially what AI is, right? We've got access to all the data in the world, and with a few keystrokes, we can get something back that's synthesized and personalized for us. So there's a day not far away where we're just talking to our AI, and it's dropping stuff at our front door, or it's getting our vehicle serviced, or it's putting a new shirt in my closet, whatever that might be. And so I think brands, it's going to be critical that whatever those attributes may be, in the case of a Costco or a Sam's Club, it's like, they do curation, right? The products that they carry are well curated, they're well priced, they're done in volume, they're accessible, right? Those distinctive attributes are going to be really important, because when I am working with that AI interface in the future, and it truly is invisible experience, I'm going to be requesting stuff from that provider, from that company, from that retailer, because there are attributes against it. So I think it is incumbent upon brands to make sure that those are deeply rooted in the products and services they deliver. You're starting to see connector, OpenAI, I think there's a new release or something that happened this week or within the past couple of weeks, and they introduced connectors or additional connectors. I think previously they had these connectors into just like Gmail and Calendar and Drive. Now they've got them going into a bunch of other places, GitHub and a bunch of other places where you can, it's much more from a business use perspective, right? So how can I access my data to get greater insights and more action against my data? Those connectors are going to be to Amazon and Walmart and Sam's Club and Dick's Sporting Goods in the near future from a consumer perspective, right? Yeah. Where I can connect my account. They know like what my family looks like, what my buying preferences are, the types of sports or the types of, deodorant I purchase, whatever that is. And it's going to have a much better profile for me to shop against. And so I believe this is just really doubles down on this idea of brands creating distinction and being firmly rooted in what their value proposition is, because it could get easy. It will be easier and easier for them to get lost in the future.
Put this last pillar that we're going to get into the same bucket of, we could probably spend an entire episode or more talking about this, and that's ethical and trust-driven CX, because everything you just said is underpinned by the critical need to be grounded in ethics and trust. And I think, well, like we've talked about before, customers are willing to pay more for personalized experiences, and I think they'll still likely be a look through the safety prism that a customer does when it's like, oh, I can connect this to this to this, and it's going to help improve my day. Great, but there also, I think, is likely going to be an even more significant look at, well, how comfortable am I with making brand A actually aware of what my family really looks like and what they do and what they buy. And I think that comes back to, not to pull it back to the beginning of this conversation, the service era and personal interaction, whether it's truly like physical in-person one-to-one experiences, but trust and being willing to say, this brand that I'm going to be able to connect my life to, in a sense, I'm willing to do that. And there are plenty of examples out there of brands that, not in the AI era necessarily yet, but other brands who have done wrong by customers by way of data. But I imagine, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this as we talk this pillar, why is it so vital for businesses to proactively implement transparency, privacy protection, while also showing that they're ethical, but they're also going to help you? And some of that is a value exchange of, I really can improve your life if you are going to share with me this, and this, and not get bogged down in, well, I don't know if I want to connect my bank account to this, or I don't know if I want to account my kids' data to this. How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was a bit smarter, but I think I think a couple things are going on here. I think there's an opportunity at the moment there's a lot of confusion, right? We're in a super hype cycle right now as it relates to AI and all the data that's being consumed. Even, I think one of the prime things, if you go and look at overviews of the various platforms that are out there, one of the criteria that people always talk about is like data and how's it shared, and that's, where does it go? Does it help train the model, et cetera, et cetera? So we're in this crazy hype cycle. I think that presents an opportunity for brands and for companies and businesses to come out and have a really strong stance, be very clear and open about how they use data, why they need to use data in certain ways, how you can protect and have control over that data. Can I even see the data? Can I log into a dashboard? Can I have, can I delete things?
Yeah.
Do I trust that it's being deleted? Where is it being stored? I think these are things that have been a bit hazier in the past. And I think now it's incumbent upon companies to take the wheel a bit, right? And I think it can be a differentiator and something that someone could actually accelerate themselves with by taking a really strong stance here. So I don't know where it plays out, but I know it is critical and people care about this, and they're going to only care as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the world of kind of consumers and normal people.
Yeah,
they're going to be even more skeptical, right? And they're going to care even more. Right now, we are at the very early days, right? Like the earliest days of innovation. Even if we have great usage of tools like AI, the earliest days where people don't understand all the implications. And I think that's going to happen very quickly. So big opportunity, I think, here for brands to take control and even just start talking about this. And that will create action.
Well, and somebody had written, and I remember what slide it was in a presentation I saw. It was, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, the every model you interact with, that is going to be the worst version that it's ever going to be from this point forward. Which I think it's that just rings true for so many reasons, but it's crazy to think how rapidly the model you're interacting with at this moment, your mind is blown. In a lot of cases, mine is. I stumbled upon, in doing research on Google VO3, and it's just mind blowing. Yet, to the point that statement is, it is the worst it's ever going to be at this exact moment in time. And it's a great segue to the challenges, the opportunities, and the path forward, and how brands and marketers, both CX pros and more traditional marketers, can lead the way in customer centricity. At the end of the day, and you put it nicely in the piece you wrote, is putting customers at the center of everything is still going to be the key to long-term success. What does it take for companies to truly embody this principle and lead the way in putting customers first, but also shaping what the future of CX is going to be?
I think this goes back, as you said, to just being grounded in the people, right? Being grounded, understand their worlds, understand what they're concerned about, understand what they're trying to accomplish, understanding where they're at today, right? And so that comes through knowing your customers, seeing how they interact in the world, understanding what their journeys are, understanding what those highs and lows are, right? I think none of that stuff changes. It just, the tools that we use, the tooling that we use around it, the speed that we accelerate around it changes. But I think at the end of the day, again, goes back to the service era, pre-1900s, it's like the handshake over the counter at the corner store that evolved into something a bit more personalized. How do we recreate that and make sure, because in that interaction at the corner store, there's a lot of care and humanity that comes through in that. So it's incumbent upon us all to not lose that in the fever of technology and acceleration and all the cool, interesting things that are happening. Again, at the end of the day, we're serving people. So I think that's where I would go from a council perspective, right? Make sure you're focused on the people, what they truly need, where their gaps are, what their hopes, dreams, and fears are, and then use your tooling out to bring that to life.
Amazing stuff, as always and as expected. Before we wrap up, let's do some rapid fire fun facts about Nick Yecki. I think that there's one thing in particular I was not going to go off the rails or down the rabbit hole earlier, but I'm going to bring it up. You and I both went to Miami University, the public Ivy in Oxford, Ohio. You mentioned the bagel delivery shop. How did your business compare to, and this is going to be really inside baseball for those that don't go to Miami, but
this is great.
There's a little bagel and deli shop, is what they call it, bagel and deli in Oxford, that is a just absolute staple if you go to the university. How does your business compare to that business?
I should have worn my bagel and deli T-shirt now that it's over in the other room.
Yes.
Much different. We would not have competed. We would have brought them their bagels so they could slice them in half and make delicious sandwiches out of them. So,
all right, good deal. They were not a competitor. Got it.
Yeah, always a Cool Jules fan. And oh man, I always get this. People make fun of me. It was like the blueberry bagel, cream cheese, cinnamon sugar and banana in it. I forget the name's escaping me right now.
Yeah.
Delicious though.
I'm feeling it.
You know,
Somebody who's
you make
listening
the
from
mistake
Miami
every
is
now
going to
and
be
again.
so upset.
Yeah, you'd get 2 bagels, and that would always be like the dessert bagel involved. But
It's the best.
yeah, that's a great place. I love it. It's still open from everything I see online. I took my family there a couple of years ago when we were in Cincinnati, went down to Oxford, and they didn't love it as much as I hyped it up, but I thought it was still as good as it gets. So
they're still young. They don't quite understand the power of a bagel at 2 in the morning.
Exactly. No, they don't. They definitely don't.
What else keeps you busy when you're not on the clock?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love this stuff. I'm a nerd, as I mentioned a few times in here, and listen to podcasts and reading a ton of stuff there. Young kids like you have too. So we spend a lot of time at the sports fields and playing. So, you know, and I made a commitment, not a bad one at all, a great one, is like I'm going to get involved as much as I can. So I tend to coach all the teams and
Nice.
at least assistant coach them. So I get to know my kids and their friends and the parents and all that stuff. So that keeps me really busy kind of in this era. And then my wife and I love live music. So we try to go to as many shows as possible that when they come to town, or we travel sometimes for stuff too. So actually, when I was at Miami, one of the things I did there was I ran the concert board, which we were responsible for bringing shows to campus. So we do, I don't know, 3 shows a year, which is super fun. And I learned a lot about the music business back then, which is definitely very much a service business, kind of a fascinating industry. But yeah, love that as well. But those things kind of keep me busy. Otherwise, I'm just got to take a nap from time to time, right?
When does that happen? I would love to know.
Yeah. Exactly. It doesn't happen often, that's for sure.
Let's ask them, what was the biggest or most memorable band you brought to Miami when you were there?
Oh, it's a good. Well, we brought Bob Dylan twice, which was bizarre.
Nice.
I don't know why we had him.
Did you
twice.
work with him people directly? Like were you heavily involved in that?
Yeah. Bob wasn't though. Bob usually, so you know, there's like the lore of the green room, right?
Yes,
for the musicians, and they tear up the green room or whatever, and you got to get green M&Ms or whatever, blue M&Ms, or take out the red ones. And that was the case for some. Like we had Widespread Panic there, Bush and Moby.
Classic.
I myself
yeah, likewise.
Back then, those guys hung out. They were around a bit more, so we saw them. But Bob stayed on his bus until he went on stage, walked off stage, went back on his bus, and got out of there.
Sounds about right.
Not a lot of interacting with Bob, but he put on a couple good shows. It was fun, just kind of fun to see it's crazy, man. Like setting up those stages, those stage hands, those crews that they have those guys are hardcore. They do incredible work in a very short period of time.
That's a fact.
Physically, and the engineering that goes into it too. So that was a lot of fun. I miss those days, but it was a great experience.
And then last question before we let you go. If you had to compare your coaching style to any individual NFL coach, who would you liken yourself to?
In the heat of the battle, well, football, I coach a couple flag football teams, and we're talking like first and second graders. So it shouldn't be that intense. But when you're trying to tell 5 or 6 first or second graders to run a certain play on a piece of paper and who's which one, and I've color coded it, I kind of turn into Bill Belichick real fast, get real grumpy, right? It's a grumpy mood going on. Raise my voice a little bit, but we have a good time. That's a blast. I really enjoy coaching football. I don't know, just like the structure of it is really fun. Watching the kids, it's hard. It's a hard sport, right? These are hard sports for them to do, but it's a ton of fun to see them succeed and learn a bit, and the amount that they grow. So I never thought I would compare myself to Belichick, but I do get a little grumpy in those huddles from time to time.
I'll admit, I thought you were going to go Andy Reid, but Belichick is fine, and if you're grumpy, then that's on brand for Mr. Belichick.
I think
so
Andy Reid's working with Andy Reid's got a little better set of players.
That's fair.
They're a little more tuned in. Well, than me.
maybe we'll see what happens with my Bengals this year, and you could be a Zach,
Exactly.
Zach Taylor. We'll see. Oh man, it's been so good spending time with you. Incredibly insightful deep dive as always, and it's great catching up with you. Thanks for making time for doing this.
For sure. Well, thanks for having me. This is a blast. Hopefully we do it again soon.
Likewise, man. And to our listeners, you can explore more of the thinking in Nick Yecki's article, Looking Back, Looking Forward, in EXP Magazine. We've, as mentioned, posted a link to it in the show notes. You can also find it on VML.com, where you can also read about our CX practice and our approach to the work. We'd love to hear your feedback on Human Centered. Please rate us wherever you get your podcast, including Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, and many more. If you have a topic idea or just want to connect, you can reach out to me on X at Nick Brunker or email the show. It's humancentered@vml.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.